as you would be aware, the Royal Commission of Inquiry into Abuse and Care, which I imagine wouldn't have touched a lot of you just quietly, because you're probably unlikely to have ever been one of those victims who came from a dysfunctional family background, were taken from your family, placed in institutions like Lake Alice, which was a horror story. Even then, I can remember back in the 60s and 70s, I lived just down the road in Wanganui, or into boys and girls' homes, which I had one of those just down the road from me as well when I was growing up in a housing development in Wanganui as well. But in those institutions throughout many decades, including in church-based organisations as well, a amount of abuse occurred that was inquired into by the Royal Commission, and a number of survivors in total were given a state apology from the Prime Minister as little as a few months ago. We've been following this issue for as long as I've been hosting the platform, anyhow, because I knew it was happening osmotically as a child, as an adolescent growing up. It was almost accepted within our communities that there were bad kids, mostly bad boys and bad girls, mostly Maori, who ended up in the boy and girls home, and that really you didn't want to end up in there. It was sort of offered by your parents as a sort of the ultimate sanction should you should you continue not to remember to put the top on the toothpaste. Or alternatively, there was Lake Alice, which we all knew, uh, primarily through staff, I guess, engaged in practices that none of us would consider even slightly humane at the time. So I've followed this issue, what's going to happen next, and as you know, the Abuse and Care Inquiry had a number of recommendations. I think it got to 200 at the end of it. And as far as I was of the aware, that at the end of the day, there was an apology, compensation is going to be paid. I think it's $150, or that's the maximum that can be claimed, and then we sort of move on, as I understand it. But no, we're not moving on, and most of the recommendations that came out of the inquiry, it would appear, are not going to be met by the government for a variety of reasons. Lydia Oosterhoff, who was one of the principal, if you like, litigators on behalf of victims, joins us now to review where we are and where to from here. Lydia, welcome back to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me, Michael.
Okay, I've done my best to try and explain the background. There were 200 odd recommendations from the Royal Inquiry. Royal Commission of Inquiry. I have to be honest with you, I've gone through a lot of Royal Commission of Inquiry in my lifetime through public office, and most of them have recommendations that are not honoured. But the suggestion here is that most of them won't be honoured from this Royal Commission of Inquiry. Is that your understanding as well?
Yes, so the Crown has made it very clear that the main recommendations which relate to independent redress will not be honoured. So um, all recommendations relating to setting up an independent redress scheme so that survivors do not have to go to the agencies that technically abuse them to get any form of redress has officially been thrown out the window. So to date, of the 200 odd recommendations, 3 have been implemented. And many of these recommendations, 95 of them, go back to December 2021 when the interim redress report was first published. So this is not just a current government issue, this is a cross government issue.
Yes, because one of them is, and it'll never happen. I looked at it and smiled. I have to be honest with you, that the Pope should also give, what is it? The Pope should make a public apology acknowledgement for the abuse and neglect and the care of the Catholic Church in Aotearoa, New Zealand. That ain't going to happen. So some of these just aren't going to happen. But the ones that relate to the state, your primary problem is that you needed an independent agency to be able to assess and to redress the grievances of those who were harmed by the state. Is that correct?
That is correct. So, what the government announced on 9 May is that redress for state abuse will remain within the Crown Response Office, which is the coordinating body that coordinates the different ministries. So if someone is abused, say in social welfare care in a boys' home, they have to go to the Ministry of Social Development, cap in hand, and ask for some form of redress for what happened to them. And it is the Ministry of Social Development that decides whether what they say happened to them actually happened to them. And unfortunately, a lot of the time people are yet again disbelieved, and we've got to realise these were people that often reported abuse when it was happening and they were told, no, this is not happening to you. Or if they haven't reported abuse, this is the first time they've ever talked about it. And so it's very re-traumatizing for the abuser then to say, actually, no, that's not what happened to you. We
There
will
has to
be
be,
the
though,
judge.
surely there has to be a gateway, because otherwise I could just turn up myself and say, I've been abused, where's my 150K?
So I heard the introduction, and you mentioned the 150K. The 150K is only relates to a very, very small cohort of people. It's about 100, just over under 200 people who were placed in the Lake Alice Adolescent Unit between the years of 72 and 77 when Dr. Lex was there. So most people, the average has been announced for across the Ministry of Social Development and Ministry of Education and Ministry of Health outside of the Lake Alice Adolescent Unit is going from $20,000 to $30,000. So I think
Okay.
the
Okay.
150,000 is quite deceptive.
No, it's fair enough. It's just unfortunate that was the one that I sort of picked up from the media commentary, but good of you to make the clarification. Okay, so I go to this particular clearing agency. What's it called again, please, Lydia?
The Crown Response Office.
The Crown Response Office, which has been set up expressly for dealing with the victims, and I then make my individual case to them, and then they judge what the level of the harm is and give me a payment. Is that the way the system works?
So the Crown Response Office is made up mainly of people who've previously been working in ministries and historic claims teams. So go to the Crown Response Office, say, I've been abused in social welfare care and I was at a special residential school. The Crown Response Office then farms that out to the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Social Development's existing historic claims teams. And those teams decide whether what you're saying is correct and come back with a offer of compensation. And just going back on your point earlier, it's not like I can just turn up and say, hey, I was in state care and I was abused in state care and get a payment. There needs to be corroborating evidence. So there needs to be records. There needs to be, for more serious abuse, it's the Ministry of Social Development undertakes what they call a step 2 analysis. So there needs to be some kind of further corroborating evidence. So someone who's known to have been a perpetrator, a conviction, a record that confirms it, which is very unlikely because if you were seriously sexually abused, the person who
Yeah,
did
just
that to you
thinking that. Yeah.
you would not normally write it down. But things like convictions or a large number of people making claims about this particular person could result in a step 2 analysis.
Right. So here we go. The place the boys and girls house that was just down the road from me was in Wanganui. It was in a state housing area in Gonville. I was a girl. We used to hear these stories, and I got raped there by another boy who was there, not by one of the staff members, but one of the boys who was in the boys and girls home with me. Now, I wouldn't necessarily, there would be no necessarily proof that that occurred. It was in the 1960s or the 1970s. There would be no, if that person, didn't end up as a recidivist rapist, somebody incarcerated in Mount Eden, I've got no chance of compensation at all then, have I really?
Unfortunately, I hate to break it to you, but the Ministry of Social Development actually won't take responsibility for the actions of other residents at all. It will only take responsibility for the lack of oversight by the caregivers that resulted in the abuse. So it won't actually accept the sexual abuse by another resident as sexual abuse against that girl. It will only accept the fact that there was inaction by the caregivers in not protecting that girl from the abuse.
But I mean, still, it's a very, very, very long bow to draw, isn't it? If that did
Oh,
occur, yeah,
exactly, and this is what we come up against day in, day out, is it is a very long bow to draw, and it's very easy for for these ministries to decline people's claims on the basis that yes, it happened in the 60s or happened in the 70s. There's no records of it. People
no,
didn't write
no,
down what they were doing was wrong.
yeah.
So yeah, you've just outlined exactly the frustrations that we face as lawyers every day.
Mm. Okay, and so there will be no compensation for those sorts of people. Is that what you're saying to me? And was there ever going to be in terms of the recommendations coming out of the Royal Commission?